The champagne had gone flat in Marcus Hartwell's glass, untouched for the past hour as he stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite. 42 floors below, the city pulsed with life, people rushing home to families, lovers meeting for dinner, children laughing in the park. He saw none of it. All he could see was the ghost of a woman who had walked out of his life 5 years ago, taking with her the only thing his billions couldn't buy back, a second chance at the life they'd dreamed of together. The invitation to his business partner's daughter's wedding sat on the marble counter, gold embossed and accusatory. Another celebration of love he'd attend alone, smiling that practiced smile that never reached his eyes, while inside he remained that same broken man who'd chosen a merger over his marriage, a deal over his devotion, success over the soul of the woman who'd believed in him when he had nothing but dreams. Marcus had built an empire. He'd conquered markets, dominated industries, and amassed a fortune that placed him among the wealthiest men in America. But every night, he returned to this cathedral of luxury and felt the echoes of his own footsteps mocking him, reminding him that all the square footage in the world couldn't fill the emptiness where Sarah used to be. The wedding was in the Hamptons, naturally. Marcus drove himself in the Aston Martin, waving off his driver because he needed something to do with his hands, some illusion of control. The ceremony was beautiful in that excessive way wealthy people mistake for elegance, but he barely noticed. He went through the motions, congratulated the bride, shook hands with business associates, nursed a bourbon he didn't want. It was during the reception, while pretending to admire an ice sculpture of swans, that Marcus decided he couldn't breathe another moment in that tent full of champagne-soaked laughter. He slipped out, loosening his tie, and started walking down the pristine streets of the exclusive village. That's when he saw her. She was standing behind the counter of a small flower shop tucked between a boutique and an art gallery, arranging white roses with such concentration that she hadn't noticed him frozen on the sidewalk. The late afternoon sun filtered through the window, catching in her auburn hair the exact same way it used to catch in Sarah's. She tilted her head, considering the arrangement, and Marcus felt his heart stop. The resemblance was impossible. The curve of her neck, the delicate way her fingers worked, the slight furrow between her brows when she concentrated, it was like watching Sarah through a window into the past. He must have made a sound, or perhaps he'd been standing there too long, because she looked up. Their eyes met, and Marcus saw her expression shift from polite curiosity to something else, recognition, confusion, and then a flash of what looked like pain before she schooled her features into a professional smile. "Can I help you?" Her voice was different, softer than Sarah's, with a slight rasp that spoke of too many late nights or too many tears. Marcus couldn't find words. Up close, the resemblance was both more and less striking. She wasn't Sarah. She was younger, maybe 25, with eyes more green than hazel. But something in her carriage, in the way she held herself with quiet dignity despite the simple apron and the modest shop, reminded him so painfully of his ex-wife that he nearly turned and walked away. "Are you looking for flowers?" She prompted gently, and he realized he'd been staring. "Yes," he managed. "Something for, I don't know. What do you recommend?" She studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, as if she could see past the $10,000 suit to the hollowed-out man beneath. "That depends. Are you apologizing or celebrating?" The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Marcus answered honestly. "Neither. I'm attending a wedding of someone I barely know because it's expected of me, and I'm buying flowers because I'm standing in a flower shop and it seems like the thing to do." A small smile touched her lips, not mocking, but understanding. "I appreciate the honesty. Most people pretend their purchases have deep meaning." She selected a simple arrangement of wildflowers, blues and yellows mixed with white. "These are for people who are going through the motions but haven't forgotten how to hope." Marcus found himself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. "That's quite a sales pitch." "It's not a pitch. It's an observation." She wrapped the flowers carefully. $22. He pulled out his wallet, then paused. "I'm Marcus. I know who you are, Mr. Hartwell." Her tone was neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Your face has been on the cover of Forbes 3 times. Even in our little village, we see magazines. And you are." She hesitated, and in that hesitation, Marcus sensed a story. Emma Morrison. Morrison. Sarah's maiden name had been Morrison. The coincidence struck him like a physical blow, but before he could process it, the shop door chimed and an elderly woman entered, clearly irregular from the way Emma's face brightened. Marcus took his flowers and left, but he couldn't get Emma Morrison out of his head. That night, lying in his hotel room, he did something he hadn't done in years. He searched for answers instead of just writing a check to make problems disappear. He returned to the flower shop the next day, then the next. Each time, he bought flowers he didn't need and engaged Emma in conversations that started about arrangements and blooms but somehow always drifted deeper. She was guarded but not cold, intelligent but not pretentious. She worked 6 days a week at the shop, which she managed but didn't own. She lived in a small apartment above a bakery. She read voraciously and volunteered at a women's shelter on her only day off. "Why flowers?" Marcus asked on his 4th visit, genuinely curious. Emma was creating an arrangement for a funeral, her hands moving with practiced grace. "Because flowers are honest. They're beautiful, they're temporary, and they mark the moments that matter. Birth, death, love, loss, flowers are there for all of it. They don't pretend to last forever, but they make the moment they're in more bearable." "That's a sad philosophy." "No," she corrected gently. "It's a realistic one. Nothing lasts forever, Mr. Hartwell. Not flowers, not empires, not even grief. The key is being present for the beauty while it's here." On his 5th visit, Marcus finally asked the question that had been burning in him since that first day. "Morrison isn't a common name. Are you related to Sarah Morrison?" Sarah Hartwell, she would have been. Emma's hand stilled over the flowers she'd been arranging. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with a sadness that seemed too deep for someone so young. "She was my sister." The world tilted. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. Emma's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the effort it took. "She never remarried. She used to say she'd already had her great love, even if it ended badly." Marcus sat down heavily on the stool near the counter, all the air gone from his lungs. Sarah was dead. Sarah, who used to dance in their tiny apartment kitchen, who believed in him when he had nothing, who he'd promised forever to and then abandoned for a business deal in Singapore that couldn't wait, except it could have. Everything could have waited, but he'd been too ambitious, too certain of his priorities. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I should have known." Emma watched him with those eyes that were so like her sister's but also entirely her own. "Why would you? You divorced her 7 years ago and never looked back. She kept track of you, though. Every Forbes cover, every business section headline. She was proud of you, weirdly enough. Said you'd achieved everything you dreamed of. I didn't dream of being alone. Then you achieved what you prioritized." The words could have been harsh, but Emma said them with a strange gentleness, like a doctor delivering a diagnosis. "Sarah used to say that we all make choices, and then our choices make us. You chose empire. She chose to let you go because she loved you enough to not be your burden. She was never a burden." Marcus's voice broke. "She thought she was. When you chose Singapore over her sister's wedding, the sister you'd never met because Sarah was estranged from our family over their disapproval of your marriage, she realized she'd never be more important than the next deal. So she freed you to become the man you wanted to be." The truth of it hit Marcus like a freight train. He'd always told himself that Sarah left him, that she was the one who filed papers. He'd never stopped to consider that he'd left her first, emotionally, in every choice he made that placed her second, third, last. "How did you end up here?" he asked finally. Emma resumed her work on the flowers, needing something to do with her hands. "Sarah got sick 2 years after your divorce. She didn't tell anyone at first, typical of her. By the time I found out, it was stage 4. I'd been working in finance in Chicago, chasing the same kind of success you found. But when I saw my sister dying in a hospital room, surrounded by machines and strangers, I realized what mattered." She smiled sadly. "She talked about you, especially toward the end. Not with anger. Sarah was never bitter. She talked about the early years, when you were both dreaming big but living small. She said those were the happiest days of her life." "Mine too," Marcus admitted. "I've spent 5 years trying to convince myself that I made the right choice, that success was worth the price. But every achievement feels hollow. Every milestone is empty. I didn't just lose Sarah. I lost the version of myself that was capable of putting someone else first." Emma studied him for a long moment. Is that why you keep coming back here? Because I remind you of her. At first, maybe, Marcus said honestly. But you're not Sarah. You're someone who learned the lesson I'm only now beginning to understand. That life isn't measured in portfolio values or quarterly earnings. It's measured in moments of connection, in sacrifices made for others, in choosing love over ambition. Choosing love doesn't mean abandoning ambition, Emma said. It means keeping your priorities straight. Sarah never wanted you to be poor. She wanted you to be present. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself returning not to the Hamptons or even to his Manhattan penthouse, but to that small flower shop and the woman who worked there. Emma became his friend, his confessor, his mirror reflecting back the man he'd become and the man he might still be capable of being. He learned that Emma had used every penny of Sarah's small life insurance policy to fund the women's shelter she volunteered at, a place for women escaping domestic violence, many of whom needed not just safety but a second chance at building a life. The shelter was struggling, always 1 month away from closing, surviving on grants and donations that never stretched far enough. Marcus made a decision that would have been unthinkable to his younger, more ruthless self. He established a foundation in Sarah's name, funding it with $50 million initially and committing to match every dollar donated by others. But he didn't just write a check and walk away. He showed up. He met the women living there, heard their stories, painted walls, and fixed leaky faucets. He used his business connections not to close deals but to find jobs for women ready to re-enter the workforce. Emma watched this transformation with cautious optimism, never quite trusting that it would last, but hoping nonetheless. And Marcus, for his first time in years, felt like he was building something that mattered, not an empire of glass and steel, but a legacy of hope and second chances. One evening, 6 months after their first meeting, Emma and Marcus sat on a bench outside the flower shop after closing. The summer air was warm, filled with the scent of roses and possibility. "Sarah would be proud of you," Emma said quietly. "Not for the money you've donated, but for the man you're becoming." "I wish I could tell her I'm sorry." She knew, Emma assured him. "She told me once that loving you was her choice, and she never regretted it, even when it hurt. She said that real love doesn't demand change, it inspires it. She hoped that someday you'd find your way back to the person you were when you believed in more than just winning." Marcus turned to Emma, seeing her clearly for the first time not as a reminder of what he'd lost, but as evidence of what love could create. Sarah's love had shaped her sister into this extraordinary woman who gave everything to strangers and asked nothing for herself. "I can't undo my mistakes," he said. "I can't bring Sarah back or reclaim those lost years. But maybe I can honor her memory by becoming the man she believed I could be." Emma smiled, and in that smile Marcus saw not forgiveness. He'd have to earn that from himself, but acceptance. That's all any of us can do. Learn, grow, and try to leave the world a little better than we found it. Marcus did change. He restructured his business priorities, delegated more, and focused his energy on philanthropic work that actually transformed lives. He and Emma built a friendship rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose, though both of them knew it might become something more when enough time had passed, when Marcus had done enough work on himself to be worthy of another chance at love. The flower shop thrived, eventually expanding into a social enterprise that trained women from the shelter in floristry and business skills. Marcus funded it, but Emma ran it with quiet competence, creating beauty and opportunity in equal measure. Standing in that flower shop 1 year after their first meeting, surrounded by blooms and possibility, Marcus finally understood what Sarah had tried to teach him. That wealth means nothing if you have no one to share it with, that success is hollow without purpose, and that the truest measure of a life well lived isn't what you accumulate but what you give away and who you become in the giving. He couldn't change the past. He couldn't save Sarah or reclaim the years they'd lost. But he could honor her memory by living differently, by choosing connection over conquest, by building not just an empire but a legacy of human kindness. And in the end, that was the greatest fortune of all. Not the millions in his accounts, but the richness of a life finally lived with purpose, guided by the memory of a love he'd been too blind to cherish and the grace of a woman who looked like his past but taught him how to embrace his future.